I would like to ask the Minister for the Treasury, further to recommendation 5 of the Arup review of the Laxey flood, what action he has taken to investigate the continuing access to and affordability of flood reinsurance for Isle of Man properties.
Minister for Treasury, Mr. Caine.
Mr. President, the Arup recommendation relates to the completion of the ongoing investigation into the availability and affordability of household insurance for those in high-risk areas. One method of achieving this could be, from our initial investigations, by the UK's Flood RE scheme, including Isle of Man households. I set out the background to the UK Flood RE scheme in my answer to the Honourable Member's question on this matter in the House of Keys in March. As I stated, previous discussions have taken place at an official level with the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs to understand if indeed this would be possible. And from these discussions, it is apparent that the changes to the scope of Flood RE would require legislative change in the UK and possibly on the island as well. As I reported in March, to pursue this matter further, I wrote to the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs to request his assistance with this matter. I've subsequently received a response apologising for the delay and for taking the matter forward due to the COVID-19 situation. Confirmation has been received at an official level that the matter is under active review by DEFRA within the restrictions of their current situation. I look forward to receiving the response and I will, of course, update members at that point.
Supplementary, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I welcome the Minister's reply on that. And it's very interesting that we've made such good progress. However, this is going to be down the line. To get the UK to change their legislation, when will that happen? Goodness knows. So I believe that we should somehow take the bull by the horns and has the Minister approached some of the insurance companies on the island? And furthermore, we are probably paying the UK insurance companies their tax because they don't always bring that to the attention of Isle of Man residents when they're taking out insurance. Has the Minister made any progress in those two aspects of the problem?
Treasury Minister, Mr. Caine.
Well, as the Honourable Member recognises that clearly, given everything that's going on, which only adds to the complexity of the situation that we are looking at in respect of Flood RE. What I can advise him and this Honourable Court is that we have been advised that the calculation to determine the levy paid to Flood RE specifies that this should exclude any policies written in the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man. So that it essentially, the statement that I've just made essentially confirms that insurers are not incorporating this into their calculations, or at least should not be incorporating this into their calculations. I do not have at this stage specific detail about how individual insurers price the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man policies differently. And that, of course, is going to be a commercial decision for the individual insurers. So it's a pretty complex picture that we're facing. It's not necessarily consistent, and of course, with different entities providing insurance, it's not necessarily clear at this stage that we will understand entirely how the pricing is being applied across the Isle of Man. But we will continue to work at this matter. But as the Honourable Member points out, this is not necessarily going to lead to a speedy resolution.
Supplementary, Mrs. Caine.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Treasury Minister and his officers for their ongoing work to establish exactly what is required to enable the Isle of Man to get flood reinsurance. But in the meantime, the recommendation does specifically say about the affordability of household insurance for those residents who have been flooded and perhaps are facing increasing premiums. And the Honourable Minister may be aware that there are several residents who have now been declined to get their flood insurance renewed. They are suffering enormous amounts of stress, and some of them are not even yet back in their properties, that they're spending considerable amounts of money refurbishing. So has the Treasury got a plan B if flood reinsurance isn't a route, or is in fact a very long-term solution that might be available to the Isle of Man in the future for both the residents who have been flooded and perhaps other residents sharing the same postcode who may struggle to get affordable household insurance in the future? Is there a plan B? Is there any other method by which Treasury will be able to assist those residents?
Reply, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. At present, there is no formal plan B. Our attention is focused on understanding whether, in fact, we can incorporate ourselves into the flood RE scheme. I'm sure the Honourable Member will recognise that would, in fact, be the simplest, most effective way for households to be able to get the insurance. As I've said, there does appear to be a number of complications around that, as there would be for any plan B, which I would suggest would be led by some sort of formal government scheme, but that would have substantial implications for households potentially across the island. So for the time being, and I appreciate it's urgent, and I appreciate the stress that some of her constituents must be under, and indeed I've had direct contact with one or two of them. I fully understand they cannot get flood insurance, although they've got their household and fire standard insurance, but cannot get flood insurance at the moment. So we will continue to press on this matter, and clearly, obviously, we need to try and give as much reassurance as possible with the actions that we take on the ground, that we are taking every step to prevent any reoccurrence, as much as a government can take steps to prevent reoccurrence of these natural events.
Honourable Member, Mr Perkins.
Thank you, Mr President. I'm glad the Honourable Minister understands part of the problem, but we actually have constituents who cannot even get car insurance, never mind house insurance or flood insurance, because of their very postcode is situated on Glen Road. Now, we need to do something urgently to put in confidence. Would the Minister consider the possibility of perhaps underwriting the access to flood insurance for a short period of time?
Well, as I said, Mr President, taking measures like that would cause government to incur significant precedent across the island and would potentially expose the taxpayer to substantial risk. I'm afraid I appreciate the difficulties, as I've said, his constituents are facing. We will take every step to try and force the agenda in respect of the flood RE. Clearly, I wasn't actually aware of the other issues now that we're extending down to items such as car insurance. Perhaps I should take that away and discuss further as to whether there are other alternative solutions. But we will do everything that we can to try and push this agenda forward, and clearly there now appears to be another discussion to be had around further items connected with insurance matters for Glen Road residents.
Honourable Member for Council, Miss August Hanson, final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. On the 10th of October last year, I asked the Minister whether or not we might look at something similar to the House Improvement Adaptation Scheme 2019 that Tynwald was presented with the following week. And I asked if there was perhaps any perspective of compensation from home insurance or anything like that, and the response was that it may set precedents that could expose taxpayer funds to unnecessary risks, which I entirely understand. So I'd just like to sort of understand a little bit more about the differences between that type of a scheme and the flood RE scheme, and whether or not he actually sees how promising it might be that residents might have access to that. How confident is he? Thank you, Mr President.
Treasury Minister.
I think the most sensible answer to that is I thank the Honourable Member for her question. I think rather than me speculate on these very sensitive matters, I will take on board the comments that have been made this morning, discuss them with the Chief Financial Officer, and to determine whether there may be any other way forward. But as I said, I think from all perspectives, the easiest and most sensible way forward is to work hard to try and incorporate flood RE risks and the scheme across to the Isle of Man.